Hey everybody, this video is to help you out with your laws of exponents homework. So the first thing we'll talk about is what is an exponent. So just a quick reminder, if I had something like 5 cubed, that just means 5 times 5 times 5, or 125. So basically, how many times are you multiplying the base together? So I just threw out a term there that I'll be using, so just to define that quick. The main number there, that's called your base, and then this is your exponent, or your power. So the base of this one is 5. The exponent, or power, would be 3. So first off, let's look at an exponent with multiple parts. Let's say we had 4x to the third. Written like that, that exponent would go to each separate variable. So I would have 4 to the third and x to the third. 4 to the third is 64. X to the third would be the simplified version of that. Parentheses are extremely important in this case, though, because 4x to the third, in this case, would only mean the x's to the third. So that's actually done. That's actually simplified. 4x to the third would be the simplified version of that. So watch those parentheses very carefully, particularly in a case of a 0. So let's look at that. So let's stick with that 4. We just said 4 to the third is equal to 64. 4 to the second would be equal to 16. 4 to the first is equal to 4. So then we want to figure out, what does a 0 power do? If we look at this here, every time I go up, I'm multiplying by 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. So therefore, if I go the other way, I should be dividing by 4. So 64 divided by 4 is 16. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So if I go there to there, 4 divided by 4 is 1. Let's try that with a different number. Somebody pick a number for me. I'm just kidding. Let's try 5. So 5 cubed is 125. 5 squared is 25. 5 to the first then would be 5. If we keep dividing by 5, 5 to the 0 is equal to 1. So hopefully you've noticed the pattern there. Any number to the 0th power is equal to 1. That's kind of your first exponent rule there. So then going back to like what we just talked about with the parentheses there, let's say I had 4x to the 0. That would be 4 to the 0 and x to the 0. 4 to the 0 is 1, x to the 0 is 1. So that whole thing just becomes 1. As opposed to if I had 4x to the 0, that would just be 4, only the x's to the 0, x to the 0 is 1, which would actually be 4. So watch those parentheses, be careful of that. That's kind of the first thing to look out for. The next thing we're going to look at is fractions. Fractions are pretty simple. You just do it to the top and to the bottom. So if I had 3 over x squared, that'd be 3 squared over x squared. In other words, 9 over x squared. Same thing with zeros. If I had 4 over x squared to the 0, 4 to the 0 is 1, x squared to the 0 is 1, 1 over 1 is just 1. So fractions work just the same. You just do it to the top, do it to the bottom. Okay, so if we extend that table we were doing, 16, we said we divided by 4 to get 4. We divided by 4 to get 1. If I keep going then and take this down to negative 1, 4 to the negative 1 would be 1 divided by 4, or 1/4. 4 to the negative 2 would be 1/4 divided by 4, which gives you the fraction 1/16, or you could make it a decimal if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it as a fraction, though, because that kind of shows us another pattern. What do we do with the negative exponent? Well, if you look here, 4 to the first was 4. 4 to the negative first is 1 over 4. 4 to the second was 16. 4 to the negative second is 1 over 16. So if we know 4 to the third is 64, we should know 4 to the negative third. Take a minute, think on that. Okay, that was enough time, hopefully. You could pause if not. It's 1 over 64. So a negative exponent basically flips it over. You're dividing by it instead of multiplying. As we've talked about before, a negative basically means the opposite. So if we're multiplying as we're getting bigger, as the exponent grows, if we have a negative exponent, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to divide by that number. So it's 1 divided by 16 in this bottom case. Okay, so a negative does not make the number negative, it just flips it over. So let's take a couple examples of that. Let's say I had 5x to the negative 2. That would be the same as 1 over 5x squared, which would be 1 over 5 squared times x squared, which is 1 over 25x. Once again, though, make sure you're watching those exponents. Let's say I had 5x to the negative 2, just the x is to the negative 2, so the 5 stays up top, the x squared goes down to the bottom. Okay? What do you think happens if we already have a negative in the bottom? Well, if it's up top, it goes to the bottom. If it's on the bottom already, it comes up top. Generally, you're not done until you get rid of negative exponents. So let's say we had something like this. X to the negative 3 over y to the negative 2 squared. So you'd start by taking that both to the exponent. Ooh, we haven't talked about how to do that yet. Just kidding. I'll come back to that one. Remember that for later. Okay. So we'll come back to that after I talk about the next thing. What do you do if you have an exponent to an exponent, which is where I got in trouble on the last one. If you had x cubed squared, first off, think of what x cubed means, which is x times x times x. Squared means take whatever that is times itself, so it would be x times x times x times x times x times x. And looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's. So x to the sixth. We'll do one more example of that. We'll do an extreme example here. Let's say we have y to the fourth to the fifth. So that would mean y times y times y times y. And I need 5 of those. And that would be y times y times y times y to 3, 4, 5. Okay, so obviously you're not going to want to do that every time. So let's count though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Y to the 20th. If we look here, what do you do with a 3 and a 2 to make a 6? What could you do with a 4 and a 5 to make a 20? Okay, so that leads us to our next rule. If you have a power to a power, you can multiply them. Multiply those powers. Okay? So, if you have a power to a power, you can multiply them. What if you have a power times a power? What if you have like x to the fifth times x to the fourth? That'd be x times x times x times x times x. And that would be that. Gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of those. X to the ninth. Let's try another one. Let's say y squared times y to the third. Be y times y times y times y times y. And that would equal y to the fifth, it looks like. So, once again, think to yourself, what could I do with a 5 and a 4 to make 9? What could I do with a 2 and a 3 to make 5? And if you are multiplying like bases, you need to add them. Therefore, I'm not going to go through a whole example of this one. What do you think you do if you divide? That's right. you do the opposite, which is subtract. Okay, so now let's go to that one that I accidentally came to a little bit earlier. That x to the third over y to the negative second squared. So following order of operations, parentheses can't really do anything with, but you can do the exponent, is x to the 6, because 3 times 2, and negative 2 times 2 would be negative 4. You're not considered done until everything's been simplified and there are no negative exponents. So we have to figure out what to do with that y to the negative fourth. It's already on the bottom, so it comes up top, and you're done. Okay, so I'm going to get a new screen and we're going to try one that has everything all in it. Let's say you have 6x squared y to the 10th z, oops, that was ugly, let's try that again, z divided by 2x y to the 15th z times x cubed y to the 6th z to the 9th. Okay, looks crazy, looks terrible. Do it in parts. So first off, do your division just like you normally would. 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. X squared divided by x. If we're dividing, we're going to subtract. So that's 2 minus 1. Let me get a different color for this part. 2 minus 1 gives me 1x. 10 minus 15 gives me negative 5. And z divided by z would be a couple ways to think of it. 1 minus 1, which is 0. Or you could just say those are the same thing, so they'll become 1. Then times, we'll just leave this guy for now. X cubed, y to the 6, z to the 9. So it in parentheses. I'm going to go back and add on to our original problem just for giggles. Let's say there was a squared there. So now there's still a squared there. So we did parentheses, now let's do exponents. So I would do 3 squared is 9. X squared is x squared. Y to the negative 5th to the 2nd would be y to the negative 10th because you multiply them. And 0 times 2 would be 0 still there. Okay. Oops, I don't know why I put a parenthesis there. So now I've done parentheses, exponents, now I need to multiply. You multiply all the matching parts. So I would go number, there's no number over here, so that's just 1. 9 times 1 is 9. X squared times x to the 3rd, add them as x to the 5th. Negative 10 times y to the negative 10 times y to the 6th would be y to the negative 4th. And z to the 0 times z to the 9th would be z to the 9th. And I'm almost done. Last final step is this negative exponent. Right here. So the 9 is not negative, so it stays up top. The x to the 5th is not negative, so it stays up top. The y to the 4th is negative, so it goes down there and becomes positive. And z to the 9th stays at the top. So this right here would be your final answer after you've gone through it. Okay, I think that's it for laws of exponents. So as always, if you have questions, let me know. Send me a message. Good luck. You guys are doing great. I believe in you. You can do this.